Hey, my reactor, so I'm back with Pia, Orphan Chapter 20, continuing. My goodness, child, Mrs. Hudson said, laughing softly. Has the cat got your tongue? More, more relaxed now, she swayed gently back and forth, rocking the baby in her arms. I'm sorry, ma'am, Pia said. My name is Pia Lange. Well, despite my initial reaction, Pia, Mrs. Hudson said, I'm glad you're here and I'd be grateful for your help with the children. She gazed down at the baby boy, who looked to be barely 2 months old. He blinked up at her, perfectly content. This is our youngest, Leonard James. We call him Leo. He's a really good baby, but with the others to care for as well, I admit I've been a little overwhelmed. He's beautiful, ma'am, Peter said, and he was, with strawberry blonde hair and his father's masculine chin. Remembering when Ollie and Max were that small, sorrow tightened her chest, and she blinked back the tears forming in her eyes, partly from grief, partly from relief, partly from disbelief. Hopefully, no one noticed. Will you be all right for a little while, darling? Dr. Hudson said to his wife. I need to return to the office, but I shouldn't be long. I'll be fine, Mrs. Hudson said. Thank you, sweetheart. She gave her husband a peck on the cheek, then turned to Pia again. I'm sure you're starving, but first things first. Before I introduce you to the girls, you need to get cleaned up. And after that, I'll fix you something to eat, and we'll get you settled. Does that sound all right with you? Pia thought about pinching herself to see if she was dreaming. From the second she learned she was being bound out, she'd been angry at Mother Joe, thinking she only wanted to punish her further. But maybe she was wrong. Maybe the old nun knew the Hudsons would treat her well, and her chance of surviving here were better than out on the streets. Then again, maybe Mother Joe had no idea what kind of people the doctor and his wife were, and Pia had just gotten lucky. Yes, ma'am, she said. It sounds more than all right. Come with me then, Mrs. Hudson said, starting towards the door at the other end of the foyer. Then she stopped and looked back at Pia's shoes. But please remove your footwear first. Pia bent over and took off her shoes, her face burning with shame. The feet of her leggings were dirty and stained, and two grimy toes stuck through a jagged hole. Muddy would have been appalled. Surely Mrs. Hudson was too. Oh dear, Mrs. Hudson said, her forehead creased. Then she looked at Pia with sympathetic eyes. Don't worry, I know it's not your fault. After we get rid of these wrench things and get you washed up, we'll make sure to give the floor an extra good scrubbing. She turned and started towards the door again. Mortified, Pia followed Mrs. Hudson into a long hall with mounting windows looking over the side yard. Opposite the windows, doorways open into rooms filled with shiny carved furniture and decorated rugs. Floral tablecloths covered every table and sideboard, and embroidered throne pillars filled every couch and chair. Books and vases and pearl-clad lamps filled every shelf, and oil paintings and mirrors hung up on every wall. Pia tried not to stare, but she'd never seen such a beautiful house or in many knickknacks and decoration in her life. Luckily, Mrs. Hudson didn't seem to notice her gawking. Our previous nanny, Miss Bainbridge, passed from the flu a week after the parade, Mrs. Hudson said. Poor thing, I think she was about to leave us anyway, though. After all, she had just gotten engaged, but no one deserves to die that young. She wasn't here with the children at the time, thank goodness. Mrs. Hudson was talking fast, as if she was trying to explain everything before she forgot. It's a terrible, ghastly way to go, from what I heard. Dr. Hudson didn't tell me the details. He tries to protect me from them sorts of things. But I heard bodies were backing up in the homes, on porches, and in corners of rooms, and people were drowning in their own blood. Then she came to a halt and gaped at Pia, her eyes wide. Oh my word, I never asked what happened to your parents, and here I am going on and on about. She dropped her shoulder suddenly. Please tell me they didn't pass from the flu. My mother did, ma'am, Pia said. My father was sent overseas. The last I heard from him, he was in France. And you haven't heard from him since the war ended? Pia shook her head. I don't think he know where to find me, ma'am. Oh dear, Mrs. Hudson said. You poor thing. I'm so sorry. Didn't the nuns at the orphanage try to find out what happened to your father? No, ma'am, Pia said. She thought about asking Mrs. Hudson if she could help find Vader, but it was too soon. She had only just met the woman. They said they didn't have the time or resources to search for the parents of every child who walked in the door. Mrs. Hudson sighed. Well, I suppose that makes sense, and I imagine they're scared to go into the city anyway. I hope you can forgive me for not asking about your parents sooner. I do, ma'am. I swear I can't remember a thing since giving birth to Leo. She waved a hand in the air as if squatting a fly. It wasn't like that with the girls, though. After them, I felt fine. She started walking again. I didn't know why that is. Pia felt relieved. Mrs. Hudson had to ask if she had any siblings. Anyway, Mrs. Hudson continued, after our nanny passed, I thought about replacing her, but I was so worried about the flu. What if someone applied for the job without realizing they were sick until it was too late? Of course, when I found out how fast the illness was spreading, I let the cook and the maid go too. My husband, Dr. Husband, was still overseas at the time. That's how he lost his arm. A bullet hit him while he was on the front line taking care of the injured, and the wound became infected. He came home right after they removed it. And of course, I was happy he wasn't gone long. He returned right He returned right after Leo was born, you see, but he could only do so much. And he agreed we couldn't chance bringing anyone into our home with the flu going around. He said more soldiers were dying from that than were being killed in the battle. And money was tight too. Luckily, I had a substantial dowry when we were married 6 years ago. But those things don't last forever, especially when you had children. First they were diapers and clothes, then toys, and more clothes and food, and more food. And I'll be back. My phone is ringing. Bye, my reactors.